Okay, welcome to this next breakout session known as Session C, Vegetation Management Opportunities, Create Fire Suppression Opportunities. Really excited to be here with Dan Dallas. We'll do introductions in a moment. And I'm Dan Gibbs, the head of the Department of Natural Resources. But first up, I want to introduce a good friend of mine, Joe Rice. Joe is with Lockheed Martin. Lockheed Martin played a really important role last legislative session in working with the legislators on helping to build the political buy-in, if you will, on bringing in a Firehawk, which is almost like a stripped down in many ways Black Hawk helicopter that can take 11 firefighters and hold about 1,000 gallons of water. And also through my lens too, because I want to introduce Sam Parsons and Ryan McCauley with the Division of Fire Prevention Control. Their aviation part of the Division of Fire Prevention Control are the ones that really, manage the Firehawk. But through my lens, we work very closely with search and rescue teams around the state of Colorado. And when it's not being used for, fire or other activities, it could be really a huge plus, for search and rescue teams. So Joe and I served together in the legislature. We were both elected in 2006. Believe it or not, it seems like yesterday. Joe also had a very distinguished role serving in the Army, finished up as a colonel, I believe, and now has an amazing career with Lockheed Martin. So please give a warm welcome to Joe Rice.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Dan. It's always great to see you and work with you in any capacity. So our lives have crossed off and on for many years. So you got the Firehawk experts up there. So really we ought to ask them to come up and describe the Firehawk. But I did want to just give a preview of Lockheed Martin Sikorsky's Firehawk. So Sikorsky builds the Black Hawk. Black Hawk is an Army helicopter, probably very familiar with it. And then a company here in Colorado called United Rotorcraft turns the Black Hawk into a Firehawk. And so we just wanted to talk a little bit about the Firehawk and when the status of Colorado's Firehawk. The governor and legislature, as Dan said, went ahead and procured one. They take a little while to build. So Colorado will be getting its Firehawk ready for operation the end of this year or towards the beginning of next year. So I know there's not really a fire season anymore, but the peak of the fire season, won't have it this summer, but certainly hope to have it next summer. I'm also here, Kim, stand up. I want to introduce Kim Lowry. She is with Lockheed Martin in our DC office, does policy work related to civil institutions and the Forest Service and firefighting services. So she does liaison with Congress and with the departments here. And so what I wanted to let you know is that there's a small model up here. The real one is more impressive, I promise. But that is a model of the Firehawk. We have it out at the Lockheed Martin table if you'd like to come out and look at it, along with some brochures. If you would like any more information about the Firehawk, the state went ahead and procured one. And this is a big deal. States don't typically procure an asset like that. That is an amazing firefighting machine, and it's not something that states typically have had to do. But as you all know, with fires becoming the size and scope over the last, unfortunately, many years, and with the building and the urban interface, fires are becoming more frequent. And the challenge is the way that states typically, and again, the experts are here, typically handled firefighting crews and apparatus was they rely on the federal government or they rely on contractors. And the challenge is with so many fires in so many places at the same time, the state felt like it needed an asset that it owned. It didn't have to get in line and compete with other, unfortunately, with other fires in other places. The benefit of the Firehawk, there are all out. It's just like anything else, right? You need different tools for different things. As Dan said, it carries 1,000 gallons. I believe the modeling is showing it could get to anywhere in the state within about 45 minutes. And so the Firehawk is initial attack. If you can get to a fire while it's still small, as soon as it's been detected, that is the benefit of the Firehawk. If you want something that carries more water, there are things that carry more water, but this is something that can handle initial attack. And of course, my friend, a Wildland firefighter here, if there's fire crews that need close direct support, if you want to try to direct a fire or protect a structure, the Firehawk can be used for that as well. So I want to just really give credit to Governor Polis for identifying a problem and coming up with an innovative solution. Again, this is not something that states typically do. And of course, the legislators, and you all know Bob Rankin, it was Senator Rankin, Representative Lynch, Senator Fenberg, and Representative McCluskey who carried the bill to get the Firehawk through the legislature this session. We are in conversations with the state right now about the possibility of procuring additional Firehawks. The challenge with these kind of machines is the Army gets the first cut of the Blackhawks coming off the production line. So to pull one out and divert it over to become a Firehawk and put it to another use has to be planned and negotiated with the Army. So currently, there are 4 Firehawks that are available for the next couple of years. So 20% discount if anybody wants to buy one today. Anyone? So there are 4 Firehawks that are available right now. And we are seeing, and I think Colorado is going to be a leader in these jurisdictions. I think there'll be other states maybe looking at forming multi-state fleets or other intergovernmental agreements. And the issue is, you know, once these 4 are gone, how long will it take to get another one? So that's the kind of conversations that we're in right now and balancing how all that would work. And again, these things are, you know, these are not inexpensive, right? But when you look at the cost of fires, and one of the speakers earlier today that just in 2021, I think it was $88 million that Colorado spent in just recovery. So that wasn't even in the cost of fighting fires. You can go back and look at the costs that have been over the years, as well as the cost to the private sector, right? To individuals, the loss of life, the insurance. So really, we commend Colorado for taking the lead. I think your state is a leader, and these gentlemen are a leader in what the state can do to protect its citizens, and obviously the effects on the watershed and such. So, Kim, is there anything you'd like to say? Yeah, come on in. We have a, yeah.
Thank you. So in addition to Firehawks, so we're not all about Firehawks, but our CEO has been out there speaking publicly and privately with Jim Cramer, Mad Money interview, and CSIS, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, and other opportunities to talk about his vision for firefighting. His concept, his vision is, you know, there's a lot that we do for the warfighter. There's a lot more that we can be doing for the firefighters, the states, not only for suppression, but for mitigation, for fire prediction. And, you know, Lockheed Martin has all of these assets and solutions that we work with all the government agencies, right? From the military to NOAA, to NASA, to federal law enforcement, to state and local. So, what he has tasked us to do is look across the company. So I'm working across the company, across the business areas, as well as corporate, to pull together an integrated system that potentially we could work with the states on, as well as the U.S. Forest Service and Department of Interior. We have a really good relationship with the U.S. Forest Service and have worked with them over the last 2.5 years. And so we're really excited about this. We have been having listening sessions. So this is great. This is my first time to Colorado, and I would love to work with Joe in having a listening session and hearing from Dan and others on, you know, kind of the gaps and the challenges, so we can kind of work together. We have a project that our CEDO initiated last year. It's a 3-year project on artificial intelligence. And we're actually working with the state of Colorado. We're working with the Center of Excellence in Fire Prevention and Control. And we'll be working on a demo probably in the next month or 2 on fire mapping, perimeter mapping, and through artificial intelligence, machine learning. And so we hope to further mature what we're doing and further strengthen our partnerships, not only with Colorado. I work with a number of the Western states, from Utah to California to Washington State. So it's great being here. You know, I'm flying back to DC tomorrow, but the thing I love about coming out to the States is that I get to hear perspectives, and I get to learn and bring that voice back to Washington, DC. And just a quick, so before I joined Lockheed Martin 2.5 years ago, I spent 29 years in the federal government. So I retired right before coming to Lockheed Martin. I worked for the Departments of Homeland Security, Justice, and Defense, and did a lot of work with the states on grants, federal grants. So Thank you for inviting me here today, and thank you, Joe.
You want to grab it? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. All right, great. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Lockheed, for being a part of this conference. I'm Dan Gibbs, the head of the Department of Natural Resources. I was in a panel just a few minutes ago next door, but there's a few new faces, so I'll just briefly introduce myself. I was brought in the Polis administration right in the beginning of 2019. Before that, I was elected 3 different times as a county commissioner for Summit County. And then before that, I worked as a state representative and a state senator. I always represented communities that saw a lot of fire activity, to say the least. I've been in Summit County for about 20 years. Before that, I lived in Gunnison as a kid. And I remember vividly in, 2002-ish or so, it felt like the bark beetle tsunami coming through, Grande County and then hit Summit County was going to be really challenging for our community, to say the least. And I ended up going through the Colorado Wildland Fire and Incident Management Academy to get certified as a wildland firefighter. So I've kept my certifications up every year since 2006. And Dan and I have known each other a long time, and through all the different jobs I've had, keeping that certification up and getting out on fires when I can has given me, I think, a really interesting perspective of not only what it's like to fight fires on the ground and the challenge of that. It's almost like doing CrossFit, for 16 hours, depending on what role you have. But also really looking at the policy issues, because when you do have these large catastrophic situations, it has huge impacts, on wildlife, on our water resources, on water quality and quantity. And those are all topics that, the Department of Natural Resources is really involved with, to say the least. So, take a look at, this right in back of me. These are just some of the headlines that we've seen, from a couple of years ago. We know we have about 1 in 2 Coloradans that live within the wildland urban interface. We know we have about 50,000 to 60,000 new people moving to Colorado a year. We have warmer temperatures in the 1930s Dust Bowl. And we have, fire regime that's very much the norm. And the folks that are firefighters in the room know that fire season is not just a summertime phenomena anymore, but you see it, all year round, depending on where you're at in the state. And so really, I would say, as a result of the 2019 shared stewardship MOU that the governor signed with the USDA, that kind of put a new framework together in terms of how the state collaborates with US Forest Service, and whether it's on fighting fires or working on defensible space or managing trails that could be kind of, should I say, overrun or, very busy with a lot of people with visitation numbers, that we were going to work to collaborate together. And so the governor decided about 1.5 years ago to take the next step, especially as a result of the 2020 fire season, to do things, very differently. And he actually requested a Type 1 National Incident Management Team to come to Colorado. So he sent a letter to Secretary Vilsack and Secretary Howland saying, hey, the status quo in Colorado is just not working. We need to do things differently. And so I'll introduce Dan in a moment, but he's a Type 1 incident commander. So it's he's like the Navy SEALs of dealing with all different types of incidents, literally. And so the governor requested the best of the best come to Colorado to do a thorough analysis. And what that helped to do, and Secretary Vilsack, USDA is really the lead entity that's technically has oversight over, I believe, the 16 Type 1 NEMO teams around the country. I remember vividly, he was talking to the governor and I was standing right next to him. He's like, okay, Governor, you're not exactly going to get the Type 1 NEMO team, but we're going to get you everything you want to have. We're going to bring in the best of the best to work with the state's best of the best to really do this analysis. And so fast forward, we have this great collaboration and work group with the Division of Fire Prevention Control, with the Bureau of Land Management, with the U.S. Forest Service, with the State Forest Service, the Department of Natural Resources involved as well. And we're really looking at, how we look through a lens of protecting life, property, and critical infrastructure. I know this conference is, a lot that has to do with water. And so critical infrastructure is water and watersheds as well, of course. And so, that's been really positive, to say the least, that we're all, sharing information, we're all collaborating, we're all trying to look at similar maps to focus with scarce resources, how we can really get the most bang out of the buck. The legislature also was really stepped up. They supported in 2020 or 2021, but as a result of the 2020 fires, about $88 million of post-watershed investments for not only the Colorado State Forest Service, but also supporting programs that we have in the Department of Natural Resources now called COSWAP, stands for Colorado Strategic Wildfire Action Program. How many of you are familiar with that program? Yeah. And what makes that program really unique is that, those funds can be directed. We have part of the funds that can go statewide anywhere, but then part of those are also directed towards certain landscapes in Colorado. And so that's a unique partnership with the Department of Corrections. We actually have a SWIFT crew, the state wildland inmate fire team, that's working just like 5 miles away from here right now, that the State Forest Service is working to manage. We've been already awarded over $2 million of hand crew work over the last 6 months, which is really amazing to see. Let me go forward. Okay. So this slide, did I go to? No, I'm okay. Okay. Okay, this is all right. For this, I want to show you this particular slide. When you look at, firefighter safety and the challenges on the ground, having some proactive work makes a huge difference, to say the least. And Dan, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on where you send firefighters and where you don't. But I want to focus on this bottom area. And this is my community where I live in Summit County. This is a Buffalo Mountain Fire, 2018. But what we saw there, the point of ignition, can you all see the red dot, first of all? Look right there, yeah. Okay, that was the point of ignition right in there. So you have U.S. Forest Service land, just like pretty close to those houses. And then you go a few feet and you have a wilderness boundary land over there. You have 2,800 units of homes. This is called the wilderness neighborhood. This is called Mesa Cortina. And you had numerous different entities that came together that recognized, while looking at our community wildfire protection plan, that we knew that eventually there was going to be a fire in this area. And so the community was proactive to do work. So the Forest Service, U.S. Forest Service, did work along their boundary. It's all U.S. Forest Service land. See, that was kind of painted with aerial attack. And then look over here. That's a water cistern right there. So the Buffalo Mountain District paid for the thinning around that. That's one of their water resources. The Colorado State Forest Service worked with landowners to do defensible space around these homes. So you can see it's much thinner than you'd see like out there. The money for the U.S. Forest Service was all funded by Denver Water's Forest to Faucets program. And then when the fire hit, you had, then it was called Lake Dillon Fire Rescue, but then the Division of Fire Prevention Control was involved, other state entities. So you literally had, county government, special districts, the feds, all working together to give firefighters a chance to get in there to save 2,800 homes. About $1 million was put into this project, and they saved about $1 billion with a B of home values, which is pretty, phenomenal to see. Let's go to the next slide. These are some photos from the Cameron Peak fire. Having some holes in the canopy, make a huge difference for firefighter safety. And if you don't have that, you really create a situation where folks like an incident commander like Dan probably will really question, is it worth, getting in there or not, depending on the density of the landscapes that we have. Okay, and I think that is it for my portion. And next, I want to turn it over to Dan Dallas. Dan, as I mentioned, is a Type 1 incident commander. He has been the lead IC for some of our state's most challenging wildfires. So, for example, in 2020, he was the IC for the Pine Gulch fire. He was the IC for the East Troublesome fire, over 200, actually all these were over 200,000 acres, I believe, in size. The Cameron Peak fire as well. And then other fires along the way too. But more recently too, you're out on the Marshall fire as well. So he can go anywhere around the country, but we've had some really challenging situations in Colorado where, again, Dan is the best of the best and his team is the best of the best. They'll go anywhere for fires, floods, all different hazards. So it's just an honor for me to sit next to this guy that I've known for about 15 years. So Dan, let me turn over to you now.
All right, thanks, Director. I'll just start by, you mentioned about 15 years, and when I first knew Dan, he was just the engine guy on the Summit County engine, right? And then to have him be the director of DNR now is just, time goes on. I'm going to correct you a little bit. My normal job, I'm a land manager. That's my profession. I'm a forest supervisor. And have been for about 15 years on the Rio Grande National Forest in southern Colorado. I think with the local folks, there's kind of a progression. I might be up to kind of guest Coloradan now. It's like casual tourists, second homeowner, we'll let you in a little, right? But I've been there quite a while, and just to see, I really want to give kudos to Club 20 for having this, because I believe what we're seeing here, all of you, the interest is an awakening in Colorado of what's going on kind of nationally. Dan mentioned, actually we're an asset for Homeland Security is what we are. There's 16 teams like this that, they're supposed to be the most elite teams. I saw a couple people because they was going, well, you weren't very successful if you're on the top 3 fires in Colorado history, But what you're seeing is an effect, at least I believe, on just a total change. We use the word paradigm, but the fire situation has changed. The fire behavior has changed. Our response to it has basically been the same, and we're following further and further behind. We have to do something different. And that's what this is all about, is talking about how do we go about making things different. I wish I had the numbers just right off the top of my head, but if you looked at this, our agency is pretty much in almost every state. And if you looked at it nationally, our current paradigm on, they called it random acts of restoration, the growth of fire and all that kind of stuff. There is simply no way to cut and burn our way out of this. We have to do something different. And a lot of the discussion earlier talking about collaboration, it's not just a Fed problem anymore. It's not just a state problem anymore. Most of there's just a study that came out. Here's for instance, everybody believes that, it comes off of fires come off of federal land into private land. And the truth is, if you actually analyze the situation, it's most of the large percentage of the time it comes off of private land into federal land. So everybody's belief system's being challenged by all of this. So I think the best thing to do, Dan, is we can just kind of open it up for questions. I do have some maps behind me that I can bring up. We'll just see where the conversation goes, but I can, from, you know, my own experience, I can bring up a map of just about anything I bet we talk about. So.
Okay, I think Molly.
Thanks, Dan and Dan. I appreciate it. I'm Molly Pitts and I represent the timber industry. So Dan Dallas, you've been fighting fire a long time. And starting with like the Decker fire and then what you saw on East Troublesome, how has these large insect epidemics changed the way you guys fight fire?
Molly, in several ways, and then I'm going to go deeper than that. Okay, but let me answer your question. Talk about paradigms and things that have changed. When I first started, there was just these mantras that we knew to be true. There are mental models. Let's talk about a couple of them. The fire never goes over the top of a mountain range. It stops at the top, especially if you have an alpine area. No longer true. Fires never will, they'll always stop at an aspen grove. Not true anymore. So what we're seeing, Molly, with it's an additive factor, insect and disease. So we've got persistent drought for over 20 years. Dan mentioned the temperatures higher than it was during the Dust Bowl. All those things are interacting, and the effect, the fire effect, is we're seeing embers being lofted much higher into the atmosphere and then sheared off by the wind. So all our modeling now that used to be, you know, you could expect maybe quarter to half mile of spots in front of a fire. With you name it, West Fork fire on my forest, 2013, the Decker fire, the east part of East Troublesome, the part that came down into Estes Park and across the park, those were 4 to 6 miles. So all those things are additive. They're not, there's no one thing you can point to with one exception. And I haven't heard it yet, but all of our modeling that's going on is kind of, a lot of it is not correct. And we know that now, and we don't depend on them as much. But with the persistent drought, there's something that they're getting onto. The scientists are telling us it's called water vapor deficit. And so it's dry, it creates its own cycle. Then it used to be, if we had a good snow year, right? Like we're at 100% or close to it, then that was a good sign that that the fire season would go well into the spring and into summer before it gets started up. But because we've been in this drought cycle, it got mentioned in here, I think it was Dan. So you have dry soils, you have a good snowpack on top of it. Snowpack is now going off usually about 2 weeks earlier. It soaks right into the dry soil and goes away faster. It doesn't stay wet. Then the trees aren't able to draw the water back up. And so it's this vicious cycle that's starting to play out, that's causing some of these fire effects that have changed.
Another question?
Yes, I'm Tom Jankowski, Garfield County. This is for Dan Dallas. I just heard you say that we can't burn our way out of this. We can't thin our way out of this. We can't mitigate our way out of this. And that's kind of what we've been talking about all day. Can you How do you see us getting out of this situation?
Don't get me wrong, the things that you folks are meeting about and talking about are absolutely necessary. I'm not saying don't do them. What I'm saying is we need to do them on a larger scale. So let me use an example, and we can pull it up if you want to. There were fuel breaks all the way along Stove Prairie Road on the Cameron Peak fire. But for a lot of reasons, they weren't able to connect them all the way down. So it went, basically behind Loveland. And so basically we used those fuel breaks and ran the fire up against those fuel breaks, and it was successful. But the fire got around us on the south end because there wasn't a feature like that. So what we're talking about is doing large scale things that are connected. Think of instead of shooting at this with a shotgun, now we're shooting at it with a rifle.
So I was just wondering, this is for you, Dan Dallas, what are you doing in terms of training and getting all the commanders and all the personnel up to speed on new behaviors and all that?
There's one thing that's pretty good about our organization is we've made a really conscious effort in about the last 15 years to learn from the past. And so the past has become basically, I'll just say, you're getting old if you're a decade out. Basically the last 5 years, we're having to learn a lot of things from experience, some of them bad, on this is kind of the way it is now. Forget about those things like I mentioned earlier. Fires go right over the top now. Fires don't, an aspen patch means nothing to a really roaring fire that's coming through the canopies. All those sorts of things we're having to learn as we go. The effectiveness of aircraft, all kinds of things like that. They've changed in the last 5 years. And so there's a pretty extensive learning network that everybody has access. I know Dan's seen it, the DFPC guys, they know what I'm talking about. So we're really conscious about this happened on this thing. If you see something like this again, then react differently.
I'll jump in with a question because I'm sure there'll be some more. But Dan, for folks that don't know, why don't you maybe explain, who's on your team? What do they give us a background of some of the folks and, what they also do during their day jobs and kind of where they come from around the country?
Right. So there's different teams. There's 16 of them nationwide. I think there's 3 or 4 in California. There's 2 in Oregon and Washington. There's just 1 here. But basically, here's the bottom line truth. When somebody like Ranger from Grand Valley, he literally has his fire management officer go push the button. When you order us, that's a $250,000 commitment. I bring, now it's 67 people with me. And they're it's pretty simple. You could use a military analogy. I have people that are working directly for me. So, you don't put out a fire unless there's operators out in the fields. That's operational. That's operations. You can't march with an army unless you pay them and feed them and let them sleep. So that's logistics and finance. And then you can't do anything unless you have an organized plan. So that's planning. And then I've got these other folks that are working directly for me. We've learned because we have so much interaction, liaison officer and public affairs. And then everybody else works for those those folks. So it is a real commitment when you do that thing. And then, of course, some of you are from close by or right here in Grand Junction. I wanted to make the point, it was said earlier, talking about use of aircraft and stuff like that. This is a retardant base here. So every time you see one of those big retardant planes taken off, that's $30,000 right there, right? So we're really conscious of spending the taxpayers' money, because, you know, really what happens, there's an urgency and, you know, a certain amount of chaos and stuff like that. And so people just want it put out. And it takes way more than that to organize all that stuff. So.
All right, so I have a question. So this is Merritt Linky, Grand County, so East Troublesome Fire. I'm way too familiar with that. Thanks both of you for being here. So two things. First of all, Firehawk helicopter, I think that was a great strategic move. And Grand County has 2 airports, one of which is at 8,000 feet. So I'm saying that that'd be a good place to base that out of, because everything would be downhill from there. So that's my request there. Second thing would be more a general question for both of you. And you talked a little bit about the can't thin our way or can't cut or burn our way out of this, and kind of what Commissioner Jankowski said. And this is maybe a question for both of you, what is the biggest barriers to getting this work done, to get it to where we need to be? Is it political? Is it just people's perception? Is it funding? What's the biggest barriers to getting this work done? What is it?
Let's see, I would say for me, you know, luckily, I'd say like forest health and wildfire preparedness and mitigation has never been a partisan issue at the Capitol. So it has not been, and it still continues to not be, in my opinion. But for legislators, at least at the state Capitol, sometimes they kind of weigh, okay, are we funding more money for schools or our roads? You know, there's a lot of competing interests, of course. And Joe, you remember, like when we were at the Capitol, I would sometimes carry a vial of bark beetles with me, and actually, and the state forester at the time, Jeff Yankee, loaned me a wood stump. And long story short, the beetles actually ended up hatching in March in the office. So that was one way to build awareness in the Capitol of bark beetles. But I honestly would bring them around so for the Denver legislators to get a better understanding of, hey, you know, we have millions of acres of dead trees. And guess what? You know, you should care about this, not only because we're going to have a fire at some point, but this is really going to impact where your constituents probably get their water from. You know, so I had that nexus. I used to scrap for $1 million a year to help support what used to be called the Healthy Forest Restoration Act. Now it's called the Furworm Program. But, you know, fast forward last year, the Capitol got $8 million for that furworm program moving forward. I mentioned earlier in my remarks, we got $88 million altogether for kind of like post-fire and like mitigation work, and a brand new program called CoSwap. So I think we have a lot going for us in terms of momentum. But I see some of the more challenges is like, you can't go from like $1 million to $88 million overnight. We need long-term consistent funding. Where's Molly? Molly knows in the timber industry, her membership, like, you know, a harvester can cost, you know, a brand new one, what, $800, like $1 million maybe on the front end. And so if you're only getting, if you know you're getting maybe a year-to-year contract, and you know you're not getting that 10-year long or 20-year long contract, that's not a wise investment, you know? And so I personally am a big supporter of long-term stewardship contracts, long-term funding approaches that the whole state can understand how we ramp up, but make that consistent. And that's one thing that's really challenging right now with the feds, you know, with this infrastructure package that passed. It's kind of like you go from 0 to 100 overnight. And you heard folks and leadership from the Forest Service, everyone's scrambling to figure out, how we get in line and what we're going to do. But the state, we're dealing with the same issue. Like, we're trying to figure out what kind of staffing do we need to pull off these programs in a meaningful way. So I think long-term consistent funding, I think it's less litigation, especially if you have collaboratives where people can come together and they agree on the landscapes that are done. But I don't know, it's just my 2 cents.
I'll add to that. I always try and get as deep as I can to try and figure out what the root cause of this stuff is. And I will, several things have been mentioned: funding, infrastructure. I believe it's, I want to put it in an asset frame, not a liability frame, but as a society, we have not come to grips with things have changed. And this is a threat now, like it never was. It's threatening our water supply that's dwindling, right? Climate change, whatever you want to call it. There's all these complexities that have added up into a big problem. We would have solved this as whether it's an agency, a state, a society a long time ago if there was just one thing that we could press on, but you can't. You can't just say this one thing. If we had more retardant planes, if we had more helicopters, if we had whatever it is. So the belief systems that we've had in the past, let's talk about Molly and people that say, well, it's just an excuse for more logging. Well, I don't think it is. We still need to remove some of the straws that are stuck in the ground now. That's pretty simple from an ecological perspective. So it's that's why I was so complimentary of Club 20 here. There is an awakening, not just here, but everywhere, particularly across the West, that we need to do something different. So let's talk about what different is. And then you got to include people's value system, because everything that we do is a trade-off, right? This for that. And so people need to understand that here's one of the biggest ones: smoke. There's going to be more smoke, but it's going to be proportionally less than what you've seen the last 2 or 3 years, where we smoked out. The reason that the big infrastructure bill passed is because people in New York were going, what the heck's going on here? Well, it was smoke from California and all the other places. And so this kind of awakening needs to happen, and then we need to really get to people's value systems and overcome their old beliefs. And I include myself in that. I know that the other firefighters, because we have got to accept that things are different and we need to do something about it, or we're at real risk for a lot of things that we really value highly. Our water, our wildlife, you name it.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question.
My name is Bill Edwards, the local district ranger, and this question is going towards Director Gibbs. We've been talking a lot about ways and methods to increase the scope and scale of our treatments, right? Protect our watersheds, and many times, the tools the timber industry brings is the right tool, and oftentimes it isn't. And oftentimes we're looking at other methods, and prescribed burning is one of the key ones we have, right? One of the challenges we have is we're increasing our scope and scale prescribed burning is, or finally, the smoke impacts that Dan just mentioned, and the permits we can get from the state of Colorado. And oftentimes that's the limiting factor on actually how much we can actually get done in a particular burn window. I'm wondering, from the state level, are y'all seeing any movement in that to loosen up some of those permissions?
Yes. there's a work group that's really looking at not only the CDPHE air quality component for permits, but also looking at the liability aspect as well. And so there's been ongoing discussions on that. There's also, as you know, you have to you work in Mesa County area. Yeah. So you also have to go through Mesa County Public Health too, normally for, prescribed fire as well. So I think we need to start small. Like last early spring, I worked with Vale Fire Department to do a prescribed fire, really small in the hillside, kind of east Vale area. And part of the goal of that was to kind of help build awareness for the local community to get used to what Dan was saying, like kind of seeing smoke in the air a little bit, but not like during a major, fire. And that had a really positive impact. There were like letters to the editor. They're like, thank you, local fire department. We understand the value of this and so forth. But I almost feel like you start baby steps, and every community is going to be very different in terms of how they tolerate, smoke in the air. But in terms of big picture, with CDPHE, there are discussions going on, but I don't know exactly where it's at right now, but in terms of what those requirements look like for air quality and their permits. So it's kind of ongoing. Yeah.
That dang Christian, she just hit us with the red thing. So
She did.
There's
So-
never enough time.
Never enough time. Great discussion. So thank you guys for being here. Let's give them a hand and thank them for being here.